When I first encountered John Harrison, I assumed he was just another patient. Quiet, reserved, with eyes that carried a weight I couldn't quite decipher. He arrived at the hospital for routine examinations, a tall and solidly built man in his late 40s, his salt and pepper hair neatly styled, and his smile polite but distant. His medical records listed only minor ailments. Nothing of real concern. I never imagined that he would become a turning point in my life, or that he and his wife would pull me into something far darker than I was prepared to handle. As I stepped into his room, adjusting my scrubs, I put on a professional smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. Harrison," I greeted, attempting to suppress the unease twisting in my stomach. My pulse was erratic, but I dismissed it as nerves from still being new to the job. This wasn't my first time assisting a patient, yet there was something about him that unsettled me. "Everything all right?" I asked, noting the way he shifted on the bed, his fingers twitching slightly. His gaze flickered to mine before darting away, as though concealing something. "Yes, just a bit on edge," he murmured, his tone measured and steady, though there was an unmistakable strain beneath the surface. I moved to adjust his hospital gown, keeping my focus on maintaining professionalism. However, as I reached out, the fabric shifted more than I had anticipated, revealing more than intended. My cheeks burned with embarrassment, and I quickly averted my eyes, pretending not to notice. "Let's get you ready for your exam," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. He continued watching me, and in his gaze, I detected something new, an intensity that sent an uneasy thrill through me. It was an almost intimate look, unfitting for a clinical setting, and it made my hands tremble ever so slightly. I finished my task quickly, offered a polite smile, and exited the room, trying to shake the strange sensation that lingered. The following day, as I made my rounds, a message arrived requesting my assistance with Mr. Harrison again. My heart skipped a beat. Why would he specifically ask for me? The feeling that there was more to this gnawed at me. When I entered his room, his smile was warmer, more assured than before. "Thank you for coming, Rachel," he said, his voice soft, almost conspiratorial, as if we shared an unspoken secret. "It's my job, Mr. Harrison," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Our eyes locked, and something passed between us, a connection I wasn't ready to acknowledge. His composed presence filled the space, drawing me in despite myself. "You've been very kind. That's rare," he murmured, his voice low, carrying an almost secretive weight. Before I could respond, the door creaked open. I turned to see his wife, Olivia Harrison, standing there. A striking woman in her late 30s with an intense, knowing gaze. She surveyed the two of us, her sharp eyes flicking between me and her husband, and my pulse quickened. Without uttering a word, she gave a curt nod and departed. "Mr. Harrison smirked, though his expression had shifted. It was as if he had been caught, yet instead of guilt, he seemed entertained. "My wife," he remarked simply, his tone unreadable. "She's complex." I forced a tight-lipped smile and excused myself, my mind racing as I shut the door behind me. There was something between them, something I couldn't quite define. It wasn't just marital tension. It was something deeper, something unspoken. In the days that followed, Mr. Harrison continued finding ways to see me, each encounter charged with an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. One afternoon, as I reached to adjust his IV line, his fingers brushed mine, lingering a second too long. His touch was deliberate, staying against my skin just a beat too much. I pulled away, unsettled, yet unable to ignore the thrill that coursed through me. He was no longer just a patient. He had stepped over a boundary, and I had let him. Later that week, I was in the break room, struggling to sort through the tangle of emotions his presence had stirred in me, when Olivia appeared beside me. Her presence was both unexpected and unnervingly dominant. "Rachel," she said coolly, her voice cutting yet controlled. "We need to talk." I swallowed my unease and nodded, following her into an empty hallway. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable, her dark eyes analyzing me with unnerving precision. "I know what you think you're doing," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I'm telling you, stay away from him." My throat tightened. I struggled for words. "Mrs. Harrison, I don't understand what you mean. I'm just his nurse." She tilted her head slightly, a bitter smile playing at her lips. Don't insult me, Rachel. I see the way he looks at you, and I see how you look at him. Her tone shifted, no longer merely accusatory, but laced with something more ominous. You need to understand, Ethan isn't who you think he is. A shiver ran through me. Her words weren't filled with jealousy. They carried something else. Something much more sinister. Before I could press her for answers, she turned and walked away, leaving me with a storm of questions swirling in my mind. That evening, as I exited the hospital, I noticed Mr. Harrison standing near the entrance, leaning against the wall in a relaxed pose. His head lifted as I approached, his eyes lighting up in a way that made my breath hitch. "Rachel," he greeted, as though he had been waiting for me. "Mr. Harrison," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady, but my resolve wavered under the weight of his gaze. He stepped closer, the air between us crackling with something I wasn't ready to name. "Ethan," he corrected softly, coaxingly. "Ethan, this isn't appropriate," I stammered, attempting to back away, but my feet remained rooted in place. "You don't have to be afraid of her," he assured, his voice smooth, sending an involuntary shudder through me. "My wife, she likes to be in control. But she can't dictate how I feel about you." Every rational part of me screamed to walk away, but his words wrapped around me like a slow-burning fuse, intoxicating and dangerous. I wanted to resist, but there was something addictive about the secrecy, the attention. Yet deep down I knew this was far from simple. Just as his fingers reached for mine, a sharp voice cut through the charged silence. "Rachel." I turned to see Olivia standing behind us, her face an icy mask. She shifted her gaze between me and her husband, her expression unreadable, yet piercing enough to make my stomach tighten. In that instant, I understood. This was more than a personal entanglement. It was a game, but I didn't know the rules. Her stare was like a blade, slicing through whatever illusion had begun to form between me and Ethan. Without a word, I withdrew my hand and walked away, leaving them standing in the dark. In the days that followed, the tension thickened. Whispers swirled around me. Messages from Mr. Harrison arrived, subtly pulling me back into his orbit. No matter how I tried to avoid him, he always found a way to draw me back in. His voice gentle, his gaze persistent, his words laced with quiet urgency. One evening, Olivia appeared again, finding me alone in an isolated hallway. She reached out, her fingers cool as they closed around my arm. "Rachel," she murmured, her voice unexpectedly soft. She handed me a file, her touch lingering for just a moment. "Read this." Hesitantly, I opened it. What I found inside made my blood run cold. Photographs, documents, a truth I had been blind to. The man I thought I knew was nothing like the image he had painted for me. His past was filled with shadows far darker than I could have imagined. I lifted my gaze to Olivia, my voice barely a whisper. "Why are you showing me this?" She smiled, her eyes gleaming with something almost dangerous. "Because, Rachel, you have to understand. He's not the man you think he is." That was the moment I realized the intricate web of attraction, jealousy, and dominance between Mr. and Mrs. Harrison was far more complex than I had ever expected. This wasn't merely about unfaithfulness or temptation. It was a calculated battle for control and manipulation, and I had been dragged into it without even noticing. As I walked away, my thoughts swirled with uncertainty. Who was Mr. Harrison? Truly? And what did his wife hope to gain by cautioning me against him? One thing was unmistakable. I couldn't place my trust in either of them. Yet, the urge to uncover the truth burned inside me like an unquenchable flame. In the days that followed, I found myself torn between the undeniable attraction I still felt toward Mr. Harrison and the disturbing evidence Olivia had revealed. Dark thoughts crept in every time I replayed her words in my mind. I felt ensnared between their hidden motives, as if I had stumbled into a trap set by both of them, leaving me unable to trust anyone, including myself. A week later, while enjoying a rare moment of respite in the staff lounge, my phone vibrated with an incoming message. It was from the hospital receptionist, and a sense of dread settled in my stomach as I read it. Mr. Harrison had specifically requested me for his evening appointment. The message felt like a lure, pulling me back into the tangled web that bound him and Olivia. Despite my rational mind telling me to decline, I found myself outside his door that evening, steadying my breath before stepping inside. As I entered, he lifted his head from the bed, greeting me with a composed smile as if nothing had ever transpired between us. "Rachel," he murmured, his tone smooth yet deliberate. "It's nice to see you." I forced a neutral smile, determined to keep the interaction professional. "I'm just here for your evening checkup," I said, reminding myself to maintain my distance. He appeared to sense my caution. "I'm sorry," he said gently, almost remorsefully. "About my wife. She can be intense. She had some concerns." I responded carefully, my voice unsteady as Olivia's warning echoed in my mind. "Concerns about you." He sighed, his smile returning as he held my gaze. "She doesn't understand," he said, his voice steady. "What we have, it's real, Rachel. You feel it, don't you?" The vulnerability in his words shook me. Despite everything I had learned about him, a part of me wanted to believe he was sincere. Maybe Olivia had been wrong. Maybe he was just a lonely man, stuck in an unhappy marriage with a domineering wife. But then I recalled the photos, the documents, irrefutable proof of something much more sinister. I couldn't ignore the evidence. "I don't know what I feel," I admitted, stepping back in search of clarity. "And I don't think this is appropriate, Mr. Harrison." The name felt foreign on my lips. "Ethan," he corrected softly. "Please call me Ethan." His expression softened, and for a fleeting moment, he seemed like someone in need of saving. But just as my defenses began to waver, Olivia's words resurfaced. The chilling smirk on her lips as she handed me the file, the harsh reality she had unveiled. It all came rushing back, and I knew I had to put an end to this. "I believe it's best if another nurse takes over your care from now on," I said, my voice resolute despite the trembling in my hands. For an instant, he looked caught off guard, his expression hardening slightly. "You don't need to be afraid of her, Rachel," he said, his voice sharper now. "And you don't need to be afraid of me either." There was an undercurrent to his tone that sent a chill through me. "I'm not afraid of you," I replied, though I wasn't certain I believed it myself. He leaned in slightly, his eyes darkening. "Good," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, more of a warning than reassurance, "because I always get what I want." That night, I lay awake, my mind tangled in memories of every exchange I'd had with both him and his wife. They were engaged in a dangerous game, that much was clear. But I couldn't tell who was winning, or worse, if I had been the prize they were both after all along. As days passed, I took care to avoid him, deliberately maneuvering around his requests and switching shifts whenever possible. Yet, no matter how much distance I put between us, I couldn't shake the persistent sensation of being watched. I'd glimpse him in the corridor, his eyes tracking my movements, his smirk almost taunting. At times, I'd feel another gaze upon me, one that didn't belong to him. Olivia. She would appear just long enough for me to notice her presence, her expression unreadable, her piercing stare a silent reminder that she was still watching, still aware. Then, one evening, as I was wrapping up my shift, I heard a voice call out to me. "Rachel!" I turned to find Olivia standing in the dimly lit hallway, her expression impassive yet unnervingly focused. She met my gaze, her look as sharp as a blade. "I need to show you something," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "It's about Ethan." I hesitated, but the urgency in her tone was impossible to ignore. Silently, I followed as she led me down a secluded corridor, away from the busy hospital ward, into an empty office. She shut the door behind us with deliberate precision before turning to face me. "You need to know the truth," she began, bitterness laced in her voice. "About my husband." My pulse quickened as she handed me another file, her fingers lingering for a brief moment. Her eyes narrowed, scrutinizing me. "You're not the first," she said, her voice laced with something almost like pity. "He's done this before, many times." I flipped open the folder, my breath catching as I scanned the pages. They were filled with printed emails, text messages, conversations with other women, other nurses, the same lines, the same charm, the same haunted expressions in their eyes as they fell into his trap. Convinced they were special, only to be discarded like the ones before them. My stomach twisted as I grasped the depth of his deceit. Why are you showing me this? I asked, my voice unsteady. Because, she replied, her tone cold and unwavering. I refused to let him win. She had endured his games for too long, and now she intended to put an end to them. She leaned in, her gaze unwavering. We can stop him, Rachel. But I need you to play along. Just a little longer. My mind reeled. She was asking me to stay close to him, to act as though nothing had changed, to become a pawn in her plan for revenge. And in the weeks that followed, I did just that. I played my part, maintaining the illusion that I was still captivated by Ethan Harrison's charm. I visited his room regularly, concealing my true feelings, and observed as he carried on his deception, unaware that his wife and I had joined forces. With every meeting, I gathered more details, meticulously collecting every shred of proof Olivia requested. I remained cautious, keeping a close eye on him, waiting for the moment he would make a mistake and expose his real self. Yet, as time went on, my emotions grew more conflicted. He was still the same captivating, mysterious man I had met at the beginning, and despite knowing the truth about him, I couldn't entirely shut out the emotions he evoked in me. I despised myself for it, but a part of me still craved his attention, that intoxicating sense of the forbidden that had initially drawn me to him. One evening, he finally confronted me, frustration woven into his tone. "Rachel, you've been distant," he murmured, reaching for my hand, his gaze holding the same intensity that had once ensnared me. "Is something wrong?" I withdrew my hand, forcing a reassuring smile. "No, Ethan. Everything's fine." But he wasn't fooled. His eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across his face. He was beginning to sense the shift, realizing something had changed. A surge of unease ran through me as I wondered if he had already uncovered my partnership with his wife, if he was already strategizing his next move. Later that night, Olivia Jacobs sent me a message, her words terse and urgent. "Meet me in the office. Now." I slipped away from the ward, finding her in the same vacant room where we'd previously met. She appeared more tense than ever, her face pale, her hands tightly clasped. "It's time," she said in a hushed voice. "Tonight we put an end to this. I have everything we need." She handed me a key, her expression fierce. "You know what to do." A rush of both fear and anticipation surged through me as I accepted the key, realizing that the moment we had been preparing for had arrived. I would enter his room one last time, under the guise of a routine check, but this time, armed with all the damning evidence we had compiled. I hesitated, glancing at her, uncertain if I could go through with it. But Olivia nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Do it, Rachel. End this, once and for all." As I made my way down the dimly lit corridor, my heart pounded in my chest. The weight of every decision I had made, every boundary I had crossed, pressed down on me. I knew that after tonight, there would be no turning back. Taking a deep breath, I arrived at his door, gripping the key Olivia had given me like a lifeline. My mind spun with tangled thoughts and emotions, but I knew this was it, the final move in their game. One way or another, I would walk out of that room with the truth and free myself from their web of deception. The room was dimly lit, silent except for the soft hum of the medical monitors. Mr. Harrison lay back on the bed, his eyes closed. For a brief moment, I thought he might be asleep, but as I stepped closer, his eyes flickered open, fixing on me with that same familiar expression, both inviting and unsettling. "Rachel," he murmured, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I didn't expect you to come back tonight." "Why wouldn't I?" I responded, forcing my tone to remain casual, though my pulse pounded in my ears. I reminded myself why I was there, to follow through with the plan. He reached out, his hand hovering just above mine. "You've been distant," he observed softly, "and I've missed you." The sincerity in his voice almost shattered my resolve, but I reminded myself of what he was, of what he had done to so many before me. I couldn't let his charm influence me. Not now. "I think we should talk, Ethan," I said, my voice trembling as I forced the words out. "About everything." His expression shifted subtly, a flicker of wariness in his eyes before he quickly masked it with a smooth smile. "Of course," he replied, gesturing for me to sit beside him. I perched on the edge of the bed, barely registering its feel beneath me as I clutched the file I had brought. I inhaled deeply, steeling myself. Your wife, I began hesitantly. She told me things, showed me things about you. His body tensed slightly, his face losing some of its warmth. My wife, he repeated slowly, his voice dropping as if carefully considering his next words. My wife doesn't understand me, Rachel. You know that. She has her own issues. She always tries to control everyone around her, including me. I thought you could see that. I opened the file, my hands unsteady as I displayed the documents and photographs Olivia had given me. The messages, the intimate images with other nurses, women he had charmed, manipulated, and abandoned. Forcing myself to meet his gaze, I said, These women, they believed you cared about them, just like you led me to believe you cared about me. For a moment, he simply stared at the images, his expression unreadable. Then, a slow, eerie smile stretched across his lips. Rachel, he murmured, his voice dropping to a whisper. Do you really think you're any different? His words struck me like a slap, and an involuntary shiver ran through me. He leaned in, his face inches from mine, his dark gaze intense. You were so easy to convince, he whispered, his tone laced with quiet mockery. So eager to believe the best in me, to ignore the obvious warning signs, just like all the others. A wave of nausea crashed over me as his words sank in. He had played me, just as he had played them all. I felt sick, not only for falling for his deception, but for allowing myself to be pulled so deeply into his twisted game. I trusted you, I whispered, the weight of my own naivety crushing me. He chuckled softly, the sound hollow and laced with bitterness. That's the thing, Rachel. You all want to believe the lie. You all think you're special, but you're not. He leaned back, his expression cold and calculating. And neither is my wife. I clutched the file, every instinct screaming at me to get away from him, to run. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. So what happens now? I asked, my voice barely steady. That depends, he said smoothly. You could forget all of this. Walk away. I wouldn't hold it against you. His smile turned sinister. Or you could make things more difficult for yourself. But I wouldn't recommend that. It was in that moment that I realized he wasn't just manipulating me. He was threatening me. I stood up, my legs unsteady, but I refused to let him see my fear. You're not going to get away with this, I declared, striving to keep my voice firm. Your wife knows everything. She's not afraid of you anymore. For a brief second, his smirk wavered, a flicker of irritation crossing his expression. She won't do anything, he muttered, almost as if convincing himself. She's always been too weak to stand up to me. And now I have all the proof I need to ensure she stays silent. Just then, the door creaked open and Olivia Jacobs stepped inside, her face set with unwavering determination. Her eyes flickered between us before finally landing on me, a trace of approval visible before she turned to her husband. You're right, Ethan, she said icily. I've been too weak, but not anymore. His expression twisted, a combination of rage and disbelief clouding his features. What do you think you're doing? He spat, his usual calm exterior finally crumbling. I'm taking control, she answered steadily, holding up a small recorder, her finger hovering over the play button. And I have everything I need. His eyes widened, a flash of panic revealing itself as he realized what she had done. She had recorded every word, his threats, his admissions, every damning statement. Now the power was in her hands. You won't get away with this, he growled, his voice dangerously low, but beneath it lurked a fear he couldn't quite hide. Olivia merely smiled, composed and resolute. You underestimated me, Ethan. Just like you misjudged Rachel. But I won't play by your rules anymore. Then, she turned toward me, her expression softening, her voice carrying a rare gentleness. Rachel, I know I asked a lot of you, and I know this hasn't been easy, but it's over now. Relief surged through me as the reality set in. I was finally free. I no longer had to be part of this twisted charade. Olivia had everything she needed to bring him down, to end his manipulation once and for all. As I stepped out of that room, it felt as though a heavy burden had lifted from my shoulders, leaving me with a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in weeks. I was finished with Ethan Harrison, finished with his deceit and control. And I vowed then and there that no one would ever wield that kind of power over me again. In the weeks that followed, murmurs spread throughout the hospital about Mr. Harrison and his wife. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to know. The only thing that mattered was that Olivia had finally found the strength to reveal the truth, and Ethan had faced consequences he couldn't manipulate his way out of. As for me, I found peace in leaving it all behind. I returned to my work, to my life, and to the things that truly mattered, carrying with me the lessons I had learned. I was stronger, wiser, and forever changed.